Today our topic is the carbohydrate. Every day we take a lot of foods. There are different macromolecules in our foods. Among the macromolecules, carbohydrate is the main macromolecule that compose our food. And for the biochemistry of the carbohydrate, we have to understand what is the composition of the carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is composed of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. And this carbohydrate has a long chain of organic molecules. We know that organic molecules are composed of carbons, and carbon in a molecule of the organic substance, carbon has different length of chain. So for example, it may have 100 chains in the carbohydrate molecules. So there are 100 carbons in the long chain of carbohydrate. Among these 100 chains, the functional groups are attached with this carbon atom. And in the carbohydrate, the functional groups are the hydroxyl group. There are multiple hydroxyl groups here and there in this long chain of carbohydrate. And another functional group is found in the carbohydrate molecule is the aldehyde group, sometimes the ketone groups. So the chemical name of the carbohydrate is the hydroxyl. It is the aldehyde or ketone derivatives of polyhydric alcohol. That means there are multiple hydroxyl group forming the polyhydric alcohol in the backbone of the carbohydrate, and it has another functional group, that is aldehyde derivative or ketone derivatives. The long chain of carbohydrate, if we examine the long chain with the molecular reaction, and if we hydrolyze, we divide this long chain, we can find there are some repeating units within the long chain. These repeating units are known as the monosaccharides. That means it has a long chain of 100 carbon atoms, but it has the segment or a chunk of 6 carbons that has the repeating unit of another 6. There are different 6 carbon forming a unit. This unit of carbohydrate is known as the monosaccharide. So if we discuss the carbohydrate, we have to discuss the monosaccharide. If there are two monosaccharides join with each other, they form the disaccharide. Like this, there are multiple monosaccharides may join with each other to form the polysaccharide. So we can examine the carbohydrate with our reaction or with our chemical view that the carbohydrate is classified as the monosaccharide, that is the functional unit of the carbohydrate. There is oligosaccharide, that means multiple monosaccharide, but this is not more than 10. 3 to 10 monosaccharides form the oligosaccharide, and more than 10 monosaccharide chain in the carbohydrate forms the polysaccharide. So these are the carbohydrate. The name of the carbohydrate has different names. That carbohydrate can be called as sugar. Carbohydrate can be called as the saccharide. Carbohydrate sometimes it is called as the carb, simply carb. So carbohydrate has different names and different length in its skeleton and composed of different functional molecules like hydroxyl and aldehyde ketones. Now the functional units of the carbohydrate is the monosaccharide. That means it has the same structure that has multiple units in a carbohydrate chain. The monosaccharide, if we examine the monosaccharide very closely, we can see that there are multiple carbon atoms on monosaccharide. It might be 3 carbons in a monosaccharide, it might be 4 carbon, it might be 5, 6, these carbons. So if we describe the monosaccharide, that one monosaccharide has 3 carbons, one monosaccharide has 4 carbon, one monosaccharide has 5 carbon. And look at this thing very closely, that we are discussing about the number of carbons in the monosaccharide. Before this we have talked that there is a carbohydrate molecule. In this molecule there are 1, 2, 3, 4 multiple monosaccharides. But now we are describing this monosaccharide. This monosaccharide has multiple carbon atoms. The numbering of carbon, according to the number of the carbon, we can describe these monosaccharide. If there are 3 carbons in the chain of the monosaccharide, we can call it as the triose. And if it has the 4 carbon in the chain of the monosaccharide, then it is the tetrose, pentose, hexose. These are the number 4, 5, 6. These are the number of the carbon in the monosaccharide chain. And the naming of the carbohydrate is depend on its functional group. That means the skeleton of the carbohydrate has the hydroxyl functional group, and another functional group is the aldehyde or ketone. If the carbohydrate has the aldehyde functional group, then it is known as the aldose. If the carbohydrate has the ketone functional group, it is known as the ketose. So if there is 3 carbon atoms in the monosaccharide backbone and it has the aldehyde functional group, it will have a name that is different from the molecule that has the 3 carbon atoms and the functional group is the ketone. The name of the 3 carbon containing the aldehyde functional group is the glyceraldehyde, and the 3 carbon containing ketone group monosaccharide is known as the dihydroxyacetone. So dihydroxyacetone is the 3 carbon structure, and the functional group is the ketone, dihydroxyacetone. And the glyceraldehyde, it has the aldehyde and 3 carbon atoms. If it has the 6 carbon in the skeleton and the functional group is the aldehyde, then it is known as the glucose. That is the more abundant in our food. And if there is the 6 carbon in the monosaccharide chain and the functional group is the ketone, then it is known as the fructose. So the naming of the monosaccharides depends on the functional group attached with it. This is the monosaccharide. And disaccharide, if 2 monosaccharides join with each other, they form the disaccharide. Disaccharides are the 2 monosaccharides. If there is the glucose, and the glucose is the 6 carbon aldehyde derivatives of the carbohydrate, and if the glucose molecule is attached with another glucose, that is known as the maltose. If the glucose molecule is attached with the fructose, fructose is the 6 carbon ketone group containing monosaccharide. This glucose and fructose join to form the sucrose. It is the disaccharide. And if the glucose is attached with the galactose, then it is the lactose. These are the disaccharides. Physiological important monosaccharides, disaccharides, and the polysaccharides are the starch and the cellulose. These are the polysaccharides. There are different polysaccharides. Some are homopolysaccharides. That means the same thing. That means the glucose is the repeating unit of the same thing in the skeleton. That is the homopolysaccharide. If there is multiple monosaccharides in the chain, long chain, then is the heteropolysaccharide. The homopolysaccharides are the cellulose and starch, and heteropolysaccharides are the hyaluronic acid. These are the general structures of the carbohydrate. For the detailed description of the carbohydrate, we will pick on monosaccharide. Say for example, glucose. Glucose is the 6 carbon atom and it has the functional group of the aldehyde, and the monosaccharide of glucose has some different structures, that means isomers in the nature. Glucose sometimes remain as the long chain, sometimes they form the cyclic structure. These are the different forms of the glucose. If the glucose form a 6 carbon ring, and the glucose may form the 5 carbon ring. This is the furanose and pyranose. The glucose usually remain in the nature as the furanose and the pyranose, and sometimes glucose has the rotatory, the optical activities in the dextrorotatory or levorotatory activities. That means if light passes, is the polarized light is passed through the solution of the glucose, the light will change its direction to the right or left. It is the dextrorotatory and levorotatory, and the glucose has the structure of the D and L. Here we see a glucose molecule. In this glucose molecule, you can see that there is a 6 carbon change. Here is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Here is the 6 carbon in this glucose, and here is another glucose that has also the 6 carbons. Here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. These are the 6 carbons. Among these 6 carbons, here you can see that this carbon has the 4 hands, and these 4 hands has different molecules attached with these 4 hands. And among this glucose, it has the second, third, fourth and fifth carbon has the 4 hand that has attached with the different molecules. These are known as the asymmetric carbon atom. In this asymmetric carbon, we can see that there are two functional group attached with this asymmetric carbon. Here is the hydroxyl group attached in this right side and hydrogen in the left side, and in the third carbon in the hydrogen is the right side, hydroxyl in the left side, and fourth carbon it is opposite, and fifth carbon it is hydroxyl in the right side and hydrogen in the left side. This is the structure of the glucose. When this hydroxyl group is attached in the right side of the fifth carbon of glucose, then it is known as the D-glucose. And if we place a mirror here and we opposite this figure and if we observe this figure in the mirror, we will see like this structure. And in this structure, all the things are the same. All the asymmetric carbon and the functional carbons has the same functional group except the fifth carbon. In the fifth carbon, the hydroxyl group is attached in here in the left side and hydrogen in the right side. So there is the rotation of the functional group of the fifth carbon of the glucose molecule, and now we call this carbon as the this carbon containing glucose as the L-glucose. So the D-glucose, when there is the hydroxyl group is attached in the right side of the fifth carbon of the glucose, and when the hydroxyl group is attached in the left side of the hydroxyl group of the fifth carbon of the glucose, then it is known as the L-glucose. In the nature, the D-glucose is the abundant. This is the long chain or chain structure of the glucose. Glucose has different structures, and sometimes the glucose is form the structure like this. Here is a cyclic structure. Here is a cyclic structure of glucose, D-glucose. In the nature has the D-glucose, and we are discussing the D-glucose in different forms. Here is the D-glucose in the pyranose ring. In the pyranose ring, we can see that there is the 5 carbon and 1 oxygen in here. In this figure, we can see that the pyran. This is the pyran. Here is the 5 carbon and 1 oxygen, and here is the 4 carbon and 1 oxygen. This is known as the furan. So D-glucose forms the D-glucopyranose like this, and if it has the it has the 4 carbons and this side chain, then it is known as the D-glucose furanose. So this is on a structure of the glucose. This is the cyclic structure. This is the chain structure of the D-glucose, and here is another cyclic structure of the D-glucose. This is known as the Fischer projection of glucose. This is known as the Hawat projection of glucose. These are the different chemical structures of the glucose, and in this glucose there are also asymmetry in the hydroxyl group. Here we can see that hydroxyl group is in the downside of this structure, and here is the hydroxyl group is the upside of the structure. So this is known as the alpha D-glucopyranose, and here is the beta D-glucopyranose. This is the asymmetry, or these are the different forms of the glucose. And monosaccharide, important monosaccharide is the glucose, and glucose is remain in these various forms in the nature. Thank you all.